Okay, good morning, everybody. We are live from Lincoln this morning. It is the last time we'll ever do this at Lincoln, so we wanted to celebrate over here with our Lincoln people. We know we have people spread out all over the district, and we're very excited to welcome you back. Today is the day I learn what it feels like to open for Dylan. So we'll try to do my best, but obviously I am no George Kiros, and we'll look forward to welcoming him in just a little while. I want to start out by recognizing and acknowledging a lot of the stress, a lot of the uncertainty, anxiety that you may have about getting this school year started. But I personally am not going to dwell on that for the purpose of my morning presentation. We will be doing various different things throughout the week to help work through some of the health and safety, some of the learning and teaching implications of our current situation. But today I'm going to try to fulfill my responsibility, which is to try to set the stage for how we work toward realizing our vision and implementing our mission in the 2020-21 school year. So welcome. I'll share with you some of the objectives for the day here, or for my portion of the day. And we're going to start out. I know that this is a very strange way to introduce people, but we do have some board members that are visiting the schools where they are the board liaisons this year. So if we have any board members anywhere at any of our schools in any of our sessions, if you could just please take a minute to introduce yourself. And I see Dr. Margaret Harrell, our board vice president, is here with us at Lincoln. So welcome. We'll take a minute for other people to do the same. And also the same with new teachers. Obviously, tomorrow is the day you're going to do a lot of work in your buildings. We had our new teacher academy last week. But if you have any new teachers among you, if you could take the opportunity to introduce yourself and we can start to get to know you a little bit. Any first year teachers or new people to the district? All right, at Lincoln. Some things never change. Welcome back to school. As we know it, we have to get interrupted by the PA system or it is not school. All right, sir. All right, excellent. Welcome aboard. And then also, we may have some retirees in our rooms with us. Is there anybody in here at Lincoln that is in their final year? Nobody here? Okay, if you are somebody who is going to be retiring after this year, please take a moment to let everybody acknowledge and thank you for your contributions to District 205. And then also finally, we have several new administrators this year, primarily at the district office, and they are visiting the different schools across the district. So if, for those of you that are new at one of our schools, please take this opportunity to also introduce yourself to the people that you're visiting with this morning. Next thing I want to do is we have a terrific partner in our District 205 Foundation. They are extremely supportive. I can't even imagine what we would do without them, to be honest with you. That's how important they are to us. And so I want to give Christy Amendola, the executive director, an opportunity to share with all of us some of the great things that they've done and some of the work that they are planning for the upcoming school year. Christy.
All right, is this better? Okay. So I'm also a parent of 2 middle school girls at Bryan. So we are working on our own back to school plans here. We've lived here in Elmhurst for 16 years. I got involved in the schools when my oldest daughter was in kindergarten. And it's been an incredible experience. I do think that this has been the most difficult time by far, but I will say that I still feel very optimistic about what we have in front of us. And I think it's due to all of you sitting here. I feel greatly indebted to many, many teachers in this district. In fact, my daughter's kindergarten teacher is sitting right here in this room. So I really do believe that together we will figure this year out, and it really will be a fantastic experience for our kids. So in the time that I have with you today, I just wanted to give you a quick recap on what we've done over the last 4 or 5 months, give you a sense of what our priorities and focus are for this year, and just a couple of ways that you can help us with our mission. So first, we have updated our name and our logo. We used to be District 205 Foundation, and we felt like that was a little bit of a mouthful, so we have shortened it up to being Foundation 205. So over the fall, you'll see some things coming out that have our new logo on it and a few campaigns. We've also really tried to extend our social media presence. So I would encourage you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We really, really love featuring stories of great things happening in the classrooms. So if you have things happening in your classroom, please share them with us. We are always focusing on our grant winners, but just great things that are happening in Elmhurst. We want to share that with our business and parent communities. At our mission's core, we are here to support teachers' creative ideas. And that is one of the things that we focus our efforts on every year. And last year, in the spring, we actually awarded $133,000 in themes grants to teachers across the district. And we were kind of sad we didn't get our regular opportunity to come in with balloons and cowbells and all of that, but we had a great celebration anyway. And we're really, really pleased to make those investments in the schools. Some of the highlights that we supported were sensory regulation tools for everyone at every school in the district, creative tech tools for the elementary schools, a middle school workshop series to deal with learning how to behave appropriately online, and then some expansion with virtual reality tech at York, not only using virtual reality tech, but then also learning how it is devised and coding and doing the back end stuff of virtual tech. And then finally, and I would say maybe the most significant thing we've done since the COVID started was we created the Community Response Fund. About the second day that we were in lockdown, it seemed apparent that there needed to be a cohesive way for community members to support our students and their families. And it was an incredible, incredible initiative, and the outpouring of support that we felt from this community was moving and inspirational. And over about 2.5 months, we raised $122,000. And what we did with that is we deployed those resources quickly to lots of community organizations so that they could do their mission effectively. So we gave grants to the United Community Concerns Association, Elmhurst Walk-in Assistance Fund, Yorkville Food Pantry, the Northern Illinois Food Bank, and organized all of those mobile food trucks that were here over the summer. I think for me, that was the most clear evidence of our resiliency as a community and really gives me faith in what we can accomplish as we move forward. So what lies ahead for us this year? It will be a very different year. We generally host the big Wizards game and a giant gala. And those things are on hold right now, as you might imagine. But our commitment to you is not changing. We are still trying to be creative in ways to raise funds so that we can continue to fund our themes grants in the spring. We are working with local community organizations to help address issues of diversity, inclusion, looking for some resources to help with that across all of our schools. And then we'll be definitely working with the district to help with support, tools, technology, needs that might arise that we don't even know that we have yet as we get going this fall and seeing what you might need in your classrooms to teach in a different way. So what can you do to help us support our mission? The first thing is share your ideas. If you have ideas for things that you think would be great for themes grant, please apply. If you have ideas that you just think somebody should know about, you can always reach out to me and talk to me about it. We get the best ideas from you, the teachers. You're in the classrooms, you're with the students. So please communicate with us so we can help to meet those needs. As I said before, share powerful teaching moments with us. It really, really helps our community understand what's happening in our schools in a broad way. Sometimes they might know what's happening in their kid's second grade class, but not understand the magnitude of the district as a whole. Include Foundation 205 in your communications with parents. If you received a grant or maybe somebody on your team received a grant, share those out with the community so that they know that that is an option, it's opportunity, and that they can continue to support us. And you yourself, if you're interested, support us with a gift. Your leadership certainly inspires those in our community to follow. So as I get my own 2 kids ready for school, we have desks in our homes, we have power cords, we are ready to go. But you know, I have been reflecting a lot on this and thinking about what this means for my kids and for our community. And in some ways, I feel like my kids are going to be some of the most innovative and creative and flexible individuals that we've ever seen, because their circumstances have necessitated it. And I really do feel confident that you as leaders will lead them through this. I know that they really, really admire you, and I have absolute faith that we're going to figure this out. And I'm really, really grateful that my kids are in your hands. So thank you.
Thanks, Christy. You know, when we think of last year, we may forget all the good things that happened because of the way the year ended. And I want to take an opportunity to mark some of the highlights. And these are just a sampling. Obviously, there are many great things, but just to take a look at a couple things here. You see I have some live links. I will share this with people if you want to refer back to it for any reason. That live link with the business incubator, there was a story that just ran in the Daily Herald on some of our students that were picked by our panel of judges for the unique product that they designed that they want to bring to market. But you know, this top one is something that I'm really proud of. And every single person in this community almost really has played some type of part in this. But we were named the Illinois ASCD Whole Child Award winner for overall excellence in whole child education. So they have 5 areas: healthy, engaged, supported, and challenged learning environments. So they pick 5 districts across the state, and then they pick 1 for overall excellence across all 5 categories, and we were that district. And I think that's an outstanding recognition that you should all be proud of. Some of the high school metrics you see start with you. And so you should be very proud of where some of our kids end up and what they go out to do when they leave us. I was very pleased with some of our interdisciplinary work that we got off the ground. And and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And the master facilities plan is moving along well. We're on budget, we're on time. And if you've driven by Edison, I don't know if you have, but if you've driven by Edison, that's probably the top example right now of some of the construction that's going on. But your turn is next here at Lincoln, and we will actually have our first planning meeting beginning August 26th. That's how fast it has to start to get you guys ready to go and get your new building started here. I'm going to start by going over the operational plan, our vision: ensure all students graduate college, career, and life ready. Really, in today's world, you probably could just say life ready, because that's really what it is when you think about the evolution of what people need to be successful when they leave formal education. And then the mission, where we're trying to go, and the mission, how we're going to get there: accelerate learning for all students. Now, we try to support the vision and the mission in different ways. And one thing that I think is important, and we're going to get to this when we talk about standards a little bit, is the idea of the 6 C's, because it's really important that we start thinking about skills and that we move away from the idea of content driving everything. And most of the things that are on here are different things I'm going to talk about throughout the presentation. So the one thing that we did a couple of years ago as an administrative team is we sat down and we said, everybody talks about all students, but what does that really mean? So we came up with belief statements that we think are drivers of accelerating the mission, of implementing the mission, accelerating learning for all students. But the thing about this is we all say this and we all mean it, but we have to ask ourselves the question, do our learning environments and do our instructional practices reflect this at all times? And it's really important that we check ourselves every day about the extent to which we're truly conceptualizing in our work what it means to accelerate learning for all students. And so what we tried to do this year is we tried to narrow the focus and say, how can we really pull that off? And we thought that there needed to be a focus on standards and a focus on personalizing learning. And when you think about where we are today, personalizing learning may always have been important, but it's even more important. The idea of personalized learning pathways for all students, it's almost as if, and we've been moving toward this for a long time, every student has an IEP, if you think of it that way. Now, you may not want to think about it that way. That may sound kind of scary, but in a way, that's kind of what we're talking about. So what I want people to do is, as we really kick off the idea of relentlessly focusing on the academic, social, emotional, and technology learning standards, I don't want you to think about it in terms of content. That was the late 90s, and we kind of saw that didn't work so well. We need to be thinking about how does the focus on standards drive these 4 things? And the focus on standards does drive those 4 things. And that's where we're trying to get with our experiences for students. So I put it together in a little bit of a visual here, and the bottom part got cut off apparently. May make sense a little bit. Some people like visuals. Now, what we're trying to do in order to get to that end is, as our school improvement planning process has been evolving over the past several years, one of the things that I think that we still haven't quite gotten to, which we're trying to get to this year, is the specificity of outcomes. Narrowing that focus and getting people focused on very specific outcomes. A lot of times people think of outcomes as standardized measures of achievement. Those are lagging measures that don't drive your day-to-day practice. So we're trying to find cause and effect types of things that we can measure that will drive our everyday practice, that will impact student learning ultimately. But we're not going to necessarily focus on those outcomes. We're going to focus on some of the things that we can control. And last spring, you heard me talk about the idea that I think that in our PLC model, we've been spending too much time talking about PLC question 1, which is what do we want students to know and be able to do. That's curriculum, and that's teacher focused. And that's okay because it's necessary, because we need to determine that. We need a guaranteed and viable curriculum. But we can't spend all of our time there. We have to get to PLC questions 2 through 4. So one of the focus areas, we decided that we're going to have 100-day plans. So the first 100-day plan has to do with PLCs and moving the needle to making sure that all of our PLCs across the district are not spending exclusively all of their time focusing on PLC question 1, but are instead evolving to where they're focusing a greater percentage of their time on PLC questions 2 through 4. The second one has to do with the personalization of learning, and it has to do with our PLC work, and it has to do with our standards. And we want you to identify in your PLCs the standards that are most essential, that leverage learning. We call these power standards. There's a link there for you to just get a quick primer if you want to check out some of the definition of what a power standard is. But we want you to identify personalized learning pathways with interventions and extensions based on the most important grade level standards in your area. And the third one has to do with technology. Now, when we write our second 100-day plans, we'll get to some more specific outcomes. But the first 300-day plans are more about setting the foundation. And in technology, we have devices, we have different pockets of excellence across the district, but we want to make sure that we're institutionalizing that consistently across all grade levels, all schools, all content areas, so that we are actually, using technology to leverage learning in ways that we couldn't without it. And that's what we get, again, back to those 4 things that we want to focus on this year. How does technology promote learning in those ways that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do? So in our operational plan, we talked about a variety of different things. The 300-day plan goal areas are bold-faced here. Some of these things will eventually, over time, really not be part of our plan. They're outlined in there now because they're part of our work. For example, it's the first year that we're moving to all-day kindergarten in the district. That has a lot of ramifications for people, so we put it in there. We're working on our MTSS committee. We're trying to strengthen those processes. It's very important to our work this year, so we put it in there. Is it something in the future that we're going to be actively measuring? You know, probably not. But for now, this year, it's something that's reflected in there. But the 3 major areas we want to focus on are those 100-day plan goals. And then just an update on where are we at with our master facilities plan. Edison, as we said, is on track. Lincoln is next, then Field. And those are some of the areas that you've heard me talk about over and over again as priority areas that are reflected in our master facilities plan. And so that's important to our work. It will be important to our efforts to support learning in a future-focused kind of model. And it'll certainly personally affect you as Lincoln teachers over the next couple years as we move through the project. All right, so the opening of school plan, as it currently stands, we would have a remote start on August 24th with the goal of moving to hybrid in all grade levels except early childhood, in person at early childhood. On September 14th, there's a remote option for all parents. And we will do that provided that we can staff and provided that the health metrics allow for us to do that. And right now we're waiting. We got some updated guidelines from the Illinois Department of Public Health, but we're still waiting on metrics. They're 2 weeks overdue, and it's very frustrating, but we will communicate information regularly as it becomes available. Parents always have the option to go to remote. That's part of the state guidelines. And teachers will be expected to work from their classrooms when we begin on the 24th. So I want to talk a little bit about some instructional priorities that we want you to think about as you begin your work this week, preparing your units, preparing for your students. And the idea of equity and excellence, we don't want those to be either or types of conversations. And we need to really begin to increase our focus on what equity means, and that relates to the concept of all students. So I'm going to touch on that briefly to start to kind of prime the pump a little bit, and then over time we're going to continue to revisit that. So we live in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. If we were trying to pretend that that wasn't the case for whatever reason in our lives, last spring we found out that's the case. And it's not going to change for the foreseeable future. not just because of the pandemic. It's just the world we live in. And we have to start to accept that that's just the way it is. And we're not going back. Now, you've heard me talk about the difference between forward-focused and future-focused. Forward-focused organizations take where they are, gradually tweak it a little bit, make it a little bit better for the next year. Future-focused, take a look at where you want to be, and then you chart that path to get there. There's a difference. It may sound like a subtle difference, but it's not. It's actually a big difference. You've heard me talk about the idea of best practices versus next practices. The reason there's a link there is Ray McNulty, who you've heard me talk about, just had an article in School Administrator, and so I put the article into the slides for you. But this relates to how we approach our work and how we take a look at what innovation means. Best practice is continuous improvement. Next practice is innovation. We need to do both at the same time. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. Get to the point where we continue to do what we do better. We don't throw everything out, but we also support innovation because we need faster change than continuous improvement allows for. Otherwise, all we're going to do is perfect the 20th century school. Doesn't work in a VUCA world. So we need a common definition of innovation, and I've shared that before. So we want to be able to scale and sustain the things that we think will work. And I'm going to give you an example of what we did in Elmhurst this past year, and you may not be fully aware of it, but the 8th grade, one of the 8th grade teams at Sandburg did an interdisciplinary pilot. They changed their schedule. The rest of the school ran a different schedule. They changed their schedule. They did interdisciplinary units, and they built SEL into their grade level. Student work, team meetings, etc. The teachers there did a tremendous job, and they were extremely, extremely positive about what the learning looked like for students and how that type of an approach was different, but also more impactful for learning than the traditional approach. So we gave them permission to do that, and then we take elements of that and we figure out what works and we scale it. And when that becomes the new norm, we continuously improve that while we innovate in other areas. That's the way this works. It's not complex. It's not a gift from the gods that you either have creativity or you don't. It's a process, and we can all do it, and we all need to commit to it. And your innovation starts in your PLCs. That's where you innovate. When you have those focused goals, you will be continually looking at what works and what doesn't work, and you will be innovating. So you are all innovators, and you have to look at yourself that way. All right, now, when we talk about equity and excellence, these are the 7 practices that promote equity and excellence. They both advance the needle in the areas that we already do well, and they help us close gaps for the kids that need to advance more than one grade level at a time. These are the high leverage practices. PLCs, laser-like focus. We're trying to set our system up to support this. One of the things that I think would be very interesting to see is if we can take advantage of this not so good situation that we're in, and again, innovate and try to find ways to do things differently than maybe we did before. One of them could be, how do we get more writing in? How do we get more writing in? I really would like to see us up the ante on that one. And then the assessment pieces. This tends to apply more at the upper grade levels, I know, but we've got to stop the practice of zeros, and we got to stop the practice of grading on the average. It kills kids. If we reform the way we assess, probably be the number, well, it will be, I shouldn't say probably, it'll be the number one thing we can do to positively impact student achievement is reform the way we assess. Get rid of the practices that we know are antiquated and assess kids properly, giving them multiple ways to demonstrate their learning. And then of course, interdisciplinary, which we're also, trying to incorporate. So we're trying to align our system with these practices. But what we haven't done is we haven't been explicit. We haven't used the word equity. We haven't owned up and acknowledged openly that too many of our kids are not learning. And sometimes we can get away with that at a place like Elmhurst because so many of them are. But we know that there are many students that are struggling. And it's typically because of the standard barriers that we see. Poverty, race. We have to be candid and we have to acknowledge these things. And when we talk about all the different things that we can do from a social, emotional, and all that kind of standpoint, how do we create adult conversations? How do we create kid conversations? We can do that over the next couple of years. No problem. But you know what we can do right now that every one of us has control over right now to improve equity right now? Assess better. Seriously. You can do it and you can do it right now. And it will impact the kids who need it the most. So if we're going to strengthen our PLCs, what are the fundamental shifts to ensure healthy PLC cultures? You got to move from the left-hand column to the right-hand column. We make that shift from the focus on being of what's being taught to what's being learned. That's the whole purpose of the first 100-day goal in the district. Okay? Now, essential curriculum is still there. But what do we do with it? Do we leverage rigor, personalization, student engagement, and feedback? Or is it just all about the content? All right, so some of the practices that go along with those 7 principles that I named, we got to start looking at the preponderance of the evidence. A lot of our decisions we make on personal belief, personal experience, rather than the preponderance of the evidence. So you go through the spectrum here of those 4, and as you get along, you make better and better decisions every time you move further along to here. But ultimately, if you get to there, preponderance of the evidence, you'll be making the best inferences you can based on the information available to you. And then this goes along with the innovation. It's a major change theory principle. It's a major PLC principle. You got to move to action. You got to learn by doing. You got to do something. You can't sit around in committee and talk about it. You got to do something. Because incrementalism isn't going to work so well anymore. We need giant leaps. And we get giant leaps through innovation, through the combination of best practice and next practice. They're not mutually exclusive, they work together. So if we come back to this chart here, and we talk about the various components of it, I'm a big believer in standard definitions, so I'm going to give these to you. This is one for personalized learning. Now look at the last one, voice and choice in their learning. And look at how these definitions all work together, formative assessment and feedback. It's not just about the teachers. Feedback is not one way. For students to truly have ownership over their learning, they need to know what's next in their learning progression. That's the beauty of standards and learning targets. That's how we leverage the student ownership piece, the student agency piece, the student empowerment piece. But John Hattie, who had that quote right there, and look at the effect size of feedback, 0.66, said that the most important feedback is the feedback from the student to the teacher. Think about what that means. You're getting cues from the student about what they need, and then you're facilitating the learning for them to have ownership over their improvement. It's not just about you marking a paper. So we've used this as kind of an organizer, and you see the goal is to get to quad D, the highest level of rigor and relevance. Most standardized tests are written at quad A. So a lot of teaching ends up at quad A. And when we think of rigor, we think of things like AP, and we get up into quad C, but quad C is really school for school's sake. You know, it's within one content area. It's about academic knowledge. We need to get over here where not only are we increasing rigor, but we're increasing the relevance. And that's where we get to the engagement pieces as well. Creativity, one of the 6 C's, is the highest lever of both innovation and rigor. So when you focus on the 6 C's, think about creativity. What does that look like? I'll show you in a minute. But I like this rendition of our rigor and relevance framework. Why do you want to work harder than your students? Rigor isn't just about putting more quad A work on top of kids and then wondering why they're bored in school. Rigor is where the student is working and thinking. Working and thinking. It's about thinking, not doing. And so I think that this helps a little bit, but this is the one I really like. And I really think that we should have this in front of us during our PLCs. We should have this in front of us during our, when we're planning our units, because when we take a look at the verbs, if we write learning targets with quad D verbs and then we have assessments that match that, we'll be getting to rigor. And when we're trying to figure out what to do with technology, our third goal, if all we're using are technology apps and resources that are over here, we're not getting a quad D. So when you design your units and when you sit in your PLCs, what can we do that get to higher levels of creativity? Digital storytelling, okay, just one example. They can write their own blogs. Kids love it when their writing is published and other people can see it. They're creating up here. And I think that if we just set it right next to us, it's a great resource. So George Kiros says it this way in his book, The Innovator's Mindset. The difference between engagement and empowerment is the difference between getting kids excited about our content, interests, and curricula, and empowering students, giving them knowledge and skills to pursue their passions, interests, and their future. So even though we talk a lot about student engagement, what we really want to do, and we don't want to throw terms at you all the time, so we're just going to try to gradually make this shift. We want to start talking about student agency, student empowerment, not just student engagement, okay? And look at that effect size when students set standards for themselves and self-assess their own work. I mean, look at that. I mean, that's now they're working. That's rigor, okay? So without further ado, we're going to use this as a way to transition into our featured keynote speaker today. I'm just the warm-up band. Hope you're all ready and excited for the real thing. George Kiros is a worldwide leader in the area of innovation and has a focus on innovation as a human endeavor. His belief that meaningful change happens when you first connect to people's hearts is modeled in his writing and speaking. He's worked with all levels of school from K-12 as a teacher, technology facilitator, and school and district administrator, and is the author of the book, The Innovator's Mindset, Empowering Learning, Unleash Talent, and Lead a Culture of Creativity. And his latest book is called Innovate Inside the Box. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to George, and I thank you all very much for your attention this morning. Welcome back.
Hey, good morning, and thank you so much for the welcome this morning. And if you could just give me the opportunity to share my slides, that'd be awesome. So thank you so much for being here today. I know you probably didn't have a choice, but I appreciate you being here for this opportunity to be able to connect with you. I really wish I could be there with you today, but I'm not allowed over the border, and neither are you. So I'm stuck here in Canada, especially because I am really love the Chicagoland area. I actually grew up a Bears fan. I was a chubby kid and I just connected with the fridge. And the first Super Bowl I ever watched was the Bears winning in 1985. So it's awesome to be here with you all today. And I'm really excited to be able to share. And I know like a lot of people from this area, and I want to make sure that I connect with you. And I'm actually watching the Twitter feed, the Ignite D205, and I see Jill Muller, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. It's going to happen, obviously, with the York Transition Special Ed Department. So good morning to you all. Miss Darley tweeting away. Pia, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Jennifer Liebman, I've been following for a while, doing some really incredible things. And just watching Kevin Rubenstein, I know is new to the district, so welcome. So I'm hoping that during this time that I have with you, it's not you just learning from me, but that I have the opportunity to learn from you. And you'll see that I'm on my phone while I'm presenting to you and watching everything that's being shared on Twitter to the Ignite D205 hashtag. So please feel free while I'm speaking. It's not like you're probably all separated anyway. So please feel free to kind of share what's happening and connect with me during this time, because I want to have the opportunity to learn from you. I know from connecting like Christina Pedraza, people like that in your district, that there's already really incredible things happening, being done by not only the teachers, but the entire staff in not only doing some incredible learning, but really ensuring that kids feel really safe and welcome in their spaces and are really kind of honoring them. So please feel free to connect. And I really hope that we can learn from each other. So you can connect with me on Twitter or Instagram during this time. And as you go into this year, I know probably how complicated, things are, on your end. And we have young kids that aren't going to school yet and just kind of watching everything that's happening. And I think for me, this is something I wrote in Innovate Inside the Box, and really kind of thinking of my growth of this statement. I actually really believe that students who feel valued in the present are empowered to grow now and in the future. But I've actually tweaked this a little bit, because I think it's not just the students, it's all learners. It's every single one of us. And I think for me, something that's really important in what we do in education and actually how we connect, and I think this is part of my transition, I always focus on doing what's best for kids. And to be honest with you, I still do. I think that's really crucial to the work that we do every single day. But we also have to make sure that we take care of the people that are taking care of the kids, and really ensuring that we know that difference between being valued and feeling valued. Because I think a lot of times we can say we value people, we value the work that people do in education, but then our actions don't necessarily represent that. So I just want to make sure that I take this time to say, how hard I know your job is right now, how complicated it is. Welcome to all the new teachers, because that seems like it's all of you this year. Like all of us are new teachers. 2020 is the year of the learner, whether you like it or not. But I just want to make sure that I say thank you for all the incredible work that you're doing to do everything for every kid to be successful this year. So I just want to say how much I appreciate you. And for those of you who know nothing about me, don't know who I am, my name's George Kuros. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I know I'm really blessed to speak to a group of educators today. Honestly, because I actually didn't want to be a teacher. I went to university because my parents forced me to go. And then I was 22 years old, had a degree that was useless to me. And then I saw a movie and it changed my life. It was Billy Madison. I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm actually a trained kindergarten teacher, but kindergarten is the only grade I've never taught. I taught grade 1 to 12. Then I was a vice principal. Then I was a principal. Then I worked in central office for 8 years, which is amazing because it allowed me to travel and speak all over the world, because I worked in central office. We don't really do anything. Just kidding. Sorry, Dave. Just kidding. But I've had a lot of different experience in a lot of different roles. And although education, I look at the stuff that I'm going to share today from not only the viewpoint of an educator, but also as a dad. And these are my beautiful daughters, Kalia and Georgia. And to be honest with you, one of the things that I'm grateful for during this really difficult time and really complicated time is usually I'm on the road during this time of year. And as much as I love my job, Georgia was actually born while I was home. And like, come on, like this is the cutest kid ever. Just look at this baby, and been home. She's just turned 2 months old. And it's been a real blessing to kind of be home and you know, having this time with Kalia and her and I doing TikToks together, and just so much fun to actually see just being here to watch them grow up. And my heart is with these kids. And I think about, like, if they were entering the school this year, what would I want for them? And what not only do I want for my kids, but really what I want for every single kid that enters our room. And so what are some of the hopes that I have in the work that I actually do? And I talk about these hopes, and I think they're really important to what we do every single day. And the first one is that learners will feel welcome and valued in schools and classrooms. And I actually remember when I first became a principal, my first day in a brand new school, I walked in, and what I noticed was on the right was my office, and it was glass. You could see every kid coming in. It was such a beautiful space. And then if you go to the left, it was actually the gymnasium, and above the gymnasium doors was a picture of every single principal who had ever served in that school ever. And I watched kids walk into that school every single day, and I never saw a kid go, that was the principal in 1972. Amazing. Like nobody cared. Right. And so I actually, I talked to my secretary. I was about 2 months in. I never said anything about the pictures. They kind of bothered me. And my secretary said, hey, you know, we got to get your portrait for the wall. Do you want me to set up an appointment to get your portrait done? And I'm like, no, I'm actually not going up on that wall. And she said, well, you're the principal, you have to. I'm like, I'm the principal, I can do what I want. So I actually talked to my staff about it. And eventually I said, look, I feel really uncomfortable with those pictures on the wall. We say we're all about kids, but the first thing you see when you walk in is a picture of the principal, and like, it's all about the adults when they walk in. And so I feel really uncomfortable. And to be honest with you, my staff actually challenged me and said, no, you can't take those pictures down. Tradition, right? And one of my favorite quotes ever is, tradition is peer pressure from dead people. And so I know not all tradition is bad, but sometimes we do things that we've always done just because we've always done them, not necessarily because they're good for kids. I think some traditions, as long as they're still good for kids, they're really powerful. But I actually talked my staff out of those pictures, and we got rid of them. And then we replaced them with what's obvious, pictures of kids. And you would watch kids come into the school, and they would just stop and go, oh, I am on the wall. I am on the wall. And immediately they felt welcome and valued. And you walk into classrooms, you know, you walk into those. I saw that you're starting your year off in remote learning spaces. Right away, a lot of teachers will get into content because, you know, they're worried about, you know, lack of time, but spending that time doing circle time, things like that, just connecting with kids, you know, ensuring they feel valued. That is an investment you're going to get back tenfold. And I'll talk about that more in a second. The second one is that when my daughters enter any school, I want you to look at what they can do as opposed to focusing totally on what they can't do. And we're really weakness focused in education. We tend to like not do well in one side of our school, and then we place a plan, and then we got to like do this, but then we're amazing in this, and then we just kind of forget about it. And this is something that I really believe is that I don't use the term smart kids to refer to our top academic students, because some of the smartest kids in your school struggle academically. And how do we actually look for the gifts and talents of every single one of our kids? This will surprise some of you, but when I was a kid, I was actually, you know, in trouble all the time because I talk too much, which is actually what I do for a living now. And so some of those things that might not be conducive in the academic setting are actually the strengths of our kids. And do we find those things? And not only do we find those things in our kids, do we tap into those things, you know, as we do with our, you know, adult learners in these spaces? And the last one is that learners will feel that their contributions are necessary to the success of the class and the school as a whole. So when your students, enter your classrooms, when they enter those spaces that you're actually connect with them, if they missed a day, would they feel that the class lost out? Because I think if you create that space where students feel their contributions are so necessary to the work that we actually do every single day in our rooms, they're more likely to show up because they feel more ownership, and we tap into that. And I think these things, as I said, these are things that I really want for my own kids, but I want this for every single kid that walks in school because it's going to be better for all of us. But I also think it's really important to take advantage of the changes that are happening in our world. And when I grew up, when I was a kid, we had an Apple IIc, which we thought was the greatest computer of all time. And this is actually what both my daughters were born into. This is a totally fake commercial, but this kid is born and says, you know what? I can actually cut my own umbilical cord. Thank you. If you just let me Google that, provide me tools I need. I'm telling you, I don't even need you. I can snip it off myself. Okay. We know this is fake. This is never going to happen. This is a little bit closer though, because it is a very big day. You might want to capture the moment. You can grab a phone. You can take a selfie with the doctor, change the filter if you need to. And so when you look at this stuff, understand that my kids look at things like iPhones and YouTube the way we look at cars and electricity. They don't even think about it. It just is. They don't see this. And so do we take advantage of these opportunities that our kids, have that we didn't have when we were kids? Got to grab a selfie of the doctor as you walk out. And so this quote by Sine Bell, a principal in Houston, really connects with me on what I'm trying to do in my work. And it basically, in one sentence, she succinctly states what I'm trying to do, that students should have rich, relevant, and authentic experiences at school across the board. And when we say authentic, I think that word really strikes me as really important. We have to really think, is it authentic to the child? Some of the things that we might get excited about as adults, the kids don't actually connect with, and they don't necessarily see the relevance of that. And for example, when I was a kid, and I'm sure most of you, as you are, as you think about your own school experience, probably read The Great Gatsby in high school. And I'm not saying don't read The Great Gatsby, but I want you to really think, like, why did most of us read The Great Gatsby? Was it because it was in the curriculum, or was it because we already owned 100 copies at the school and the teacher knew the book inside out? And maybe it was something they were passionate about. And as a kid, I know this sounds horrible, I still don't like reading fiction, and it doesn't make me a bad person. There's a lot of things that I do that other people aren't interested in that kind of shape who I am as a person. And if you would have said to me as a kid, hey, there's this book, I know you love basketball, George. There's this book called The Jordan Rules. I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. Last Dance, best documentary ever. I'm sure a lot of you have probably watched it, being from the area. And I would have read that. Could you cover the curriculum and that authentic, seeing this? And you actually see this with, younger students. If they read books where they identify with the characters, it's something they're interested in, they're more likely to see that as a rich and meaningful experience. And I know that's really hard, especially in these remote learning these settings, but it's still possible. And to me, there's so many things that we have to consider as we go in these spaces. But this is what when the pandemic first hit and we're going into March, this is one of the first things I said, is that really the first thing you need to focus on is connection, and everything else is secondary. And I'm talking like a distant second. And right away, as this was happening, people were contacting me and saying, George, like, we're not actually getting people to like hand in homework, or they're not doing their assignments. I'm like, have you checked in on the kid? Have you checked in on the family? Because maybe there's something more that's going on. There's so many situations that are happening right now. And I remember when in February, I was actually asked to speak with California Virtual Academies. It's a school district that's virtual 100% of the time. It's been this way for years. And they contacted me in February to do work in April. And when I talked to them, they reached out to me in March when COVID hit. People were, being, staying at home. They said, hey, we got to postpone because we're actually struggling with COVID. I'm like, seriously? Are you really? Like, you're a virtual school. Like, this is what you do. And then as I started working with them, what I realized is, yeah, they were virtual, but you have one kid that goes to this virtual academy in a family where they have 4 kids, and all of a sudden the other 3 kids are home, but there's only 2 devices. Now they're struggling because their teachers want them to log on all at the same time, but they only have 2 devices. Then you have a family situation where one of the parents is unemployed, or it's a single family and they can't go to work. Then you have the teacher situations where the teacher now is comfortable teaching virtually, but now has 3 kids at home, and it's so complicated. And so really we have to really honor the people that we serve and understand that connection and value. And you'll see this kind of throughout. But I know over the past few months, a lot of you have felt like me and who feels like this kid, like some days I just want to reply to emails with okay in this picture. Like, I'm sure this overwhelming feeling, and I just want to make sure that we acknowledge this. And for me, I know a lot of days I felt exactly like this teacher.
Hey, so as some of you guys might know, I'm a music teacher, and I found that one of the best ways that I can process the whole transition to online learning and teaching is to write a song. So I wrote a song. I'd like to share that with you guys now. Here we go.
I don't know if it's just me. I don't know if anyone can relate to that video, but boy, I've been feeling that, and part of the reason, like, I'm sitting here, on this screen and feel like I'm in a room alone. And I so appreciate Jennifer, Megan, Bridget, Kevin tweeting and connecting with me. So I think there's ways that we can ensure that even though we are physically distanced, we still have that social connection. And I think Megan said that. I thought that was a really great point. So appreciate for sharing that. And for me, when I think about the work that we do in education, this is a question that I always try to get people to consider in the work that we do is like, would you want to be a learner in your own classroom? Like, would you actually want to spend the day with you, right? And it's super easy to say this, right? But do we actually understand learning and what those spaces look like from the perspective of our kids, right? And I think that to me is really important. It's not saying, oh no, I would love the way I teach. It's not about that. It's actually about understanding your kids and who they are and what that looks like. But this is not only something that we need to consider for our students, I think it's something we need to really consider for our staff as well. And when I was a principal, I always used to think, would I want to be on my staff? Would I actually want to be a teacher on my staff? What am I doing to my teachers that I hate that was done to me when I was a student? Because if you think about, for example, how we do staff days, a lot of people, when we do staff days, let's be honest, feel like this, if I die, I hope it's during a staff meeting, because the transition to death would be so subtle, right? Like when we used to have PD days when we're all together, like was the most appealing thing, was that we got an hour lunch, or were we excited about the learning because it was going to be so incredible in these spaces? And just kind of understanding, like I said, the experience of the people that we serve. And this is a video by Liv McNeil that was shared about her experience with remote teaching or remote learning, and what are we actually creating, and really kind of being thoughtful. Is school this checklist for our kids, or is it something that we see as really meaningful? Is it something that gives us purpose to the work that we do? Because I think in education, and I'm talking not only about kids, I'm talking about, the adults too. Too often we create these checklists of things that we have to do, and we lose our sight of why we became educators in the first place. Like, what was that real purpose and meaning of the work that we do? And then that trickles down to kids, where we start creating this, where it's just, do this, do this, do this, but we don't necessarily see the purpose. And when we lose that purpose, when we lose that meaning, what's the experience that we create, for our kids? And I just want you to watch this, and to be honest with you, I want you to feel what this kid is going through this remote learning situation. And honestly, like I have a hard time watching that video about like the experience not only for kids but like my own daughter. Is that what they experience at school? And we have to be really purposeful that it's not just about doing these checklists and getting stuff done, but do kids see meaning and value in their work every single day, and do the adults see that as well? Because it's really, we talk about self-care and we talk about taking care of our mental health, and we have all these mental health initiatives in education. But also I saw something and it really resonated with me, that too often what we do is we create all of these issues where we need the mental health strategies, where we need these things that it's like we are the root cause. I'm not saying, teach the root cause, but do we think about the purpose of what we do every single day in classroom? And that video is something I encourage that you talk about with your staff as well. Like, what does the experience of kids look like? Because I know when I became a teacher, that's not something I wanted to create for students. We want to become teachers for our kids to change the world because of us. And a lot of my thinking, to be honest with you, has been shaped by my biggest influence in education, my mom and dad, who look like the Greek Canadian version of the Sopranos, totally amazing people. And the two people you are looking at, who are both immigrants to Canada from Greece, are two of the best learners I have ever met in my life. Yet my mom had a grade 6 education and my dad had a grade 2 education, but nothing seemed to faze them. And very hard to talk about my father. He passed away about 7 years ago, and he's had a profound impact on me. But my mom, to this day, proves how incredible of a learner she is. In her 70s, my mom learned to read and write English through the use of Facebook and email. And it is amazing to see that her English gets better every single time she writes me that. Every time she writes me, I write back to her, take her email, put it in a folder. It's like my mom's learning portfolio. And right now, my mom, she lives in an apartment on her own, and she lives in a complex that's mostly seniors. And she's been very isolated, and I'm so grateful that she's been such an incredible learner, because she has no problem, going on FaceTime, connecting with us, and it makes me feel very comfortable as a dad as a son, that she has that ability. The crazy thing about my mom, though, and just as an aside, she's incredible with technology, but when she FaceTimes, she also just shows the top of her forehead. Like, she doesn't, it's her and my daughter just talk to each other's foreheads for an hour, and that's absolutely amazing. So I don't know why she doesn't figure that out. But anyways, not only did they teach me about the importance of learning, but really the importance of relationships. And when my dad passed away, I really looked at my career and what I believed in and how much it mirrored my parents actually, and how they ran their restaurant. We're Greek, that's what we do. We own restaurants. And so my every single morning when you came to our school as a principal, what I would do is I would actually be outside greeting kids, greeting people, talking to staff, connecting with adults. And if you know that kid that really struggles in your classroom, I'm going to find that kid to make sure they're smiling by the time they get to you, because your life will be so much easier for the rest of the day. And if you came to a restaurant, my mom would do the exact same thing. She'd be at the front of the restaurant. She'd welcome you. She'd say hi to you. She'd ask you about your family, see how you're doing. Because here's what my parents understood. That it's not just about food, it's about the experience. What's the experience kids have every single day in our classrooms, in our in the work that we do every single day. And as a principal, I am so proud I can say this. Every single day I was in the building, I walked into every classroom, I saw every teacher, I saw every staff member, I saw every student every single day, even for 3 seconds. I'd walk into a classroom, say, "It is so good to see you all today. You have no idea how much you mean to me. Thank you for being here." And sometimes I'd walk into class, I get the kids super jacked up and excited, and I just leave them to the teacher, because honestly, I wanted school to be a joyous place. And this is just like my dad. He would cook in the back. He'd come out, sit down with you, check in on you, see how your food was, see how you're doing. Because here's what my parents understood. Without the customer, there's no restaurant. Without the kids, there's no school. Who serves who? And what I saw a lot of incredible principals doing, because they couldn't physically go into classrooms, they would pop into Zoom sessions. They would make sure that they were connecting with kids, because they could literally be in one space. but go into multiple classrooms, from wherever they're, set up in the computer. And do we take advantage of that opportunity? Because we need to make those connections. We need to remember who we serve and why we do what we do. But it's not just a relationship piece that had an impact to me. As I said, it was their openness to learning. And this is actually the boat that my dad came to Canada on. You can actually see him closer here. And it is a really powerful image. And people don't know this about my father, but he actually started Movember on that boat. They decided to go to Canada and grow mustaches. And so here is my parents' experience compared to how we've dealt with change in education in the past. My dad has a grade 2 education. He has to drop out of school to fight in the Greek Civil War at 8 years old. Ends up losing his brother, who I'm named after. And in his 20s, the economy in Greece is decimated. So he goes from this beautiful seaside village called Astros, Greece, where it's perpetually 80 degrees. And then he moves to Humboldt, Saskatchewan, Canada, where it's minus 40 at the time. And when he comes over, he cannot read or write any language. He cannot speak English or French. He has less than $20 in his pocket. He becomes a dishwasher, a salad chef, a chef. He ends up owning a restaurant with my mom for 30 plus years. And for my parents, they saw change as an opportunity to do something amazing. They embraced the obstacles in front of them. And then I watched teachers freak out because we're going to move from Word to Google Docs. And that's like the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody ever. And so when you see this, what are the opportunities that my parents would have wished for as kids that we actually take for granted? The thought of, kids being able to, when my parents came over, they didn't know if they'd see their family again, to be honest with you. And I remember as a kid, they would phone once a month at a very specific time because long distance was so expensive. We had to get people by the phone. And now I watch my mom, actually connect with her family back in Greece, through FaceTime all the time. And it's really amazing to see. And I'm so appreciative that my parents were willing to embrace new opportunities, and they instilled this mentality in the work that, I do every single day. And here's evidence of this. This is actually me as a kid. And I remember my father came home. He was so excited because we were featured in local newspapers, the first family in town to get this insane new technology called a VCR. My dad spent $4,000 on it. He was a visionary. He went VHS, not beta. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about right now. And I'll tell you, to see myself through my father's eyes, there's no price you can put on this. And I will admit to you, I am the youngest. I'm quite spoiled. You can see it here as I open this present with my brother, realize it's chocolates, not toys. Next present. Like, why would you even wrap that? And so you see this, and I'll tell you that sometimes when I miss my dad, I go watch him on YouTube. Because if you think a picture is worth 1,000 words, what do you think a video is worth? And how powerful this is. And like I said, do we take advantage? And I love this quote from Seth Godin. He says, transformational leaders don't start by denying the world around them. Instead, they describe a future they'd like to create instead. We have to really talk about this future that we're creating right now, that is really imperative to the work that we do every single day. Because one of the things that I noticed, and I got a lot of commentary on this, is that some of our students in the past few months actually thrived in a remote learning situation where they did it in a face-to-face classroom. And we have to say, okay, what was beneficial to them? What helped them during that time? Because when we go back to face-to-face setting, we need to ensure that every single kid is thriving. And do we learn these things? And what is the future we're going to create through this process? And understanding that there's these two ideas that almost seem counterintuitive, that you can't simply replace face-to-face teaching in a remote learning situation. You can't just do one thing and just move it to that space. It's not going to work. But the other thing that's important is understanding that the values of what matters and really what matters is the same. It doesn't matter the space. Those values are really crucial to the work that we do. And what I actually saw from educators all over the world, as standardized testing was removed, is a lot of teachers started doing things that really was meaningful. And it was not just about teaching to a test. But the reality is, at some point, those tests are coming back. I don't know where you are in Illinois if they're coming back, but we have to make sure that even if they come back, that we still stick to those values of what is essential, of what is really important in the work that we do. and understanding it's not an either or. It's not either we do what's valuable or actually do well on the test. It's actually you can do both. And I'm going to talk about that. And the reason why I'm so proud of what educators did over the past few months is I saw this real big shift. And I've been talking about this for years, but I saw this happen all over the world where people started talking more about learning and really getting kids not just to focus on content, but about, creating meaningful work. And it's not an either or again. It's not about, hey, we don't need to consume information, we need to create it. Really having John Spencer will talk about the idea of like meaningful consumption, leading to meaningful creation, but really understanding how important it was to create social interaction that, in spaces. We knew that a lot of our kids struggled in that isolated area. And do we create meaningful spaces for our students to actually, connect with one another? Because no offense to any of you, if I was in grade 3 and up, if I was out of school, the first thing I'd miss is not my teacher. I might miss them, but it's my friends. And really making those connections and making sure that's really important, that work we do, but also understanding that a lot of our kids that are coming to school are very different from when we first entered school. This is my niece, Bia. This is her, 4 years old, never been to school at this point in her life. And my brother and I were about to I was leaving the house and my brother tweeted this out. I have no idea what's going on. So I started watching it, and what's happening here was Bia was watching her mom watch a makeup tutorial. And she said, hey, can I do one? She's like, oh, you want to watch a makeup tutorial? No. Can I teach one? So right now what is happening, Bia is teaching you all how to apply your own makeup. Now, honestly, I don't wear makeup, but I don't think it's supposed to jab your eye this hard. And this little eyelid tug is quite terrifying to me. I honestly had no idea how painful makeup application was every single day. But here's what Bia understands when she walks into school. Not only can I learn, I can teach. And one of my favorite quotes ever is from Joseph Joubert. He says, to teach is to learn twice. What is your depth of understanding a concept when you teach the entire world? And do we tap into this? And this is why this notion of the innovator's mindset, which I'm known for, is so important. And this is based on Carol Dweck's work. She talks about fixed and growth mindsets. And I think the growth mindset is really crucial in what we do in education. I just don't think it's enough. So I actually want to go a step further. And the innovator's mindset is simply this: the belief that abilities, intelligence, and talents are developed so they lead to the creation of new and better ideas. So simply put, I don't want kids simply to be good at math. I want kids to be able to do something with the math they have learned, which actually makes them phenomenal with math. And if you take these 3 mindsets and put them in the context of playing the piano, fixed mindset, I will never learn to play. Growth mindset, hard work, time, effort, I can learn. Innovator's mindset, I will not only learn to play, I will compose, I will create music. And where is that artistry? And often when you look at your curriculum, it tells you what you have to teach, but the how is what separates great teachers from everyone else. That artistry of the work that we do. And I love this tweet from Daniel Hodge. He said, today my students listed about 20 things they actually like about remote learning, and we quickly turn the list into changes I need to make to my classroom next year. So taking the situation as hard as it is and saying, okay, what am I learning from this? And how am I actually utilizing this and making an opportunity to make learning so much more purposeful and meaningful to my students? This is such a great example of the innovator's mindset, is that you're not just, absorbing the moment, you're actually creating something better from it. And as I said, there's these core values that are really important to the work that we do. And what you see in this circle, this is actually the whole basis of my book, Innovate Inside the Box. What you see in the middle is that core, and I'll talk about that more in a second, but these principles, these characteristics we want to develop, not only in our students, but in ourselves. What does this look like? And understanding that none of these things you're seeing on the screen actually work in isolation. So for example, the idea of problem finders, actually finding problems that are really meaningful to the work that we actually do, and getting kids to look for problems that they want to solve, not just, giving kids problems to solve that they don't care about. if they really are going to do a good job at that, they have to be empathetic. They have to understand the people they serve. But if you want to actually grow in your process, reflection is crucial. So many school districts are using this as a profile of a graduate right now, but none of these work in isolation. So when I join you in the future, we're going to talk more about these things and what this looks like. But what I'm going to talk about today is this core. And I'm going to talk about, setting the foundation of the work that we want to do in education to really focus on what needs to change. You can't just say, hey, make kids more reflective. What does that actually look like? What is this core value? And so I'm going to talk about these 4 things, but at first I want to highlight the notion of relationships, because you actually see it right in the middle. And the reason it is in the middle is I am outright saying this is more important than the other 3. That if you do not build relationships, and I am not just talking about the adults with the students, but I'm talking about the adults with one another. If you do not build that, if you do not set that foundational core, the other 3 are impossible, to achieve in a really high level. And I'm sure most of you are familiar, and if you're not, you should be, of the Rita Pearson TED Talk. I think it's not only the best education TED Talk, I think it's the best TED Talk ever. And Rita Pearson, when she says, kids don't learn from people they don't like, I've seen a lot of pushback to that statement saying, well, yeah, you can learn from people you don't like. And I agree. I actually agree. You can learn from people you don't like. And I don't think that is what Miss Pearson was saying. I think that when you have a relationship, you can learn so much more. You can go so much further. I can admit I've learned from people that I don't like, but I don't want to, and I don't want to connect. And I think as an adult, to be honest with you, I don't have to, especially in the work that I do today. But building that relationship gets us so much further. And so what does that look like? And so I'm going to talk about each one of these. And obviously I'm going to start off with relationships. And as I said at the beginning, this notion of learners who feel valued in the present are empowered to grow now and in the future. And this is all of us, in the organization. I'm sure many of your support staff that are here today have done a tremendous job to get school and spaces ready for, people, and what I saw bus drivers doing so kids could have access to Wi-Fi around the world is absolutely amazing. But really it starts in that place of feeling valued, not, like, as I said, not being valued, feeling valued. And Joe Sanfilippo, he's a superintendent in the Wisconsin area. When COVID first, came to North America, he actually said when he talked to staff, the first things that he was asking is, how are you doing? And do you need anything? Because if you do not address these 2 questions, the other one, the learning, the work that we're trying to do is way harder to actually achieve. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, just being asked these questions is all I need. Just having someone check in on you, is just knowing that someone cares about you in this manner does everything. And this is not only what the adults should be doing for each other, but also we need to actually ask these questions of our kids. And Baruti Kafele, who is one of the thought leaders in educational leadership in the world, just absolutely amazing. I had a great conversation with him on my podcast. And as I was reading his book on the assistant principal, he has a statement that I think should be in every school. Do I ensure that my staff utilize a variety of instructional strategies that take into account the different learning styles, ability levels, and social emotional needs of my students in student-centered, culturally responsive, culturally relevant, and equitable learning environments? And this is all rooted in relationships. This is all rooted in knowing your kids and knowing who they are. And when we talk about the idea, of equitable, I think one of the things that's really important to me is that doesn't mean that every kid gets the same thing. It means that every kid gets what they need to be successful, because that's actually different. And here's something I always talk about. If you have a child who thrives with pen and paper and you take that away from them and you make them use a laptop, I'd be just as bothered if you did the opposite. That if a kid thrived with technology and you made them use pen and paper, whatever the kid needs to succeed is where we need to begin. And as I said, this all starts with relationships. And this isn't just fluffy talk. This is actually rooted in research. Ohio State did some research, and they found that things like simply greeting kids in the hallway and saying hello to them, checking in on them before they enter your classroom, was shown to improve math and reading scores. Now, to be honest with you, you don't need to do research for me to believe you. If you just told me that, I'd believe you. Because if you started off the day, spending 10 minutes, valuing students and having connection with them, if you just spend that 10 minutes, they're of course going to do better. But a lot of people say, well, I don't have that time. I got to get through curriculum. I got so much to teach. But here's the thing. It's an upfront investment that's way more like stress-free. But if you don't spend that time, you're going to actually spend it with classroom management, trying to get kids back on task, checking in on kids that maybe, do this. The reason that I would spend 15 minutes a day outside greeting kids in the morning is because when they were sent to my office for something, it was a 5-minute conversation versus an hour, because the kid didn't know if I knew them or didn't know if I cared about them. So I would save time every single day by making that investment. But the thing is, right now, you don't have a hallway, right? You're starting remote. What does that look like? What do we do in these spaces? And years ago, I created this image, and I'll share these slides with you all. So if I'm going too fast, don't worry about it. You'll get all these slides after. You'll see all of these things that you can do. And there's some of these things that totally transfer to a remote learning environment. So for example, calling parents early. What I would suggest, especially if you're in the elementary, because I know it's more attainable, is you can actually, if you called parents before the year, before you had to make a negative call, make sure that parents know their kid is valued. Because when you do have to make that negative phone call, because a lot of times we have to, they know you care about their kid. But if you don't make that phone call ahead of time, like I said, the 5-minute conversation can turn into an hour conversation. And that's something that's really important to me. So when you look at these ideas, some of them apply to, a remote learning situation. So what I actually did is I took these ideas and actually said, okay, what are some ways you could do this to remote learning? So for example, how are the interactions that we do, how are they positive? And just, taking that time, to acknowledge people as you're sharing. And this is one of the reasons, like I'm looking, Suzanne Creer, tweeting away, Jennifer Liebman tweeting away, Sharon tweeting away, Kevin tweeting away. I think part of it is I want to make sure that that I'm learning from you during this space, and after I'm going to look into this deeper. One of the ideas I actually didn't share in this was something after the fact, was a teacher. It was absolutely amazing. What she had done is she had spent time every single day writing a letter to 2 kids in her classroom. So they'd actually receive a letter in the mail. And think about that experience that a lot of our kids don't actually get in our time, and how much they'd be excited about that, to actually get a letter, that is written directly to them. And as I said earlier, a lot of these things might be harder at the high school level because you have so many kids, but it doesn't make them any less important. And if you actually watch, kids become less interested in school as they get older, but we tend to actually lose the focus on relationships, as you get in high school. That you might have some teachers, and I'm not saying this is your district, but I'm sure all of you are aware of this, that, wanted to teach high school math because they love math, but not really kids. No elementary teacher ever said, ooh, I'm really excited about grade 2 math, and that's why I want to be a teacher, right? Like that focus on building relationships is so important in the work that we do, and spending that time getting to know our students. And as you start the year, I actually wrote this blog post, and if you go to bit.do/4ideas, you should be able to find the link. And I talk about, having like a virtual meet the teacher. These are not all my ideas. There's some I curated from other people, doing some virtual icebreakers, things like that. And so if you look at that, hopefully it can give you some ideas as you start the year to build some relationships with your students, because that is the foundation of the work that we do. And this quote from Megan Lawson, a good friend of mine, she says, we don't have to be perfect to make a difference. We need to care deeply about our impact on kids, care deeply about our words, and we need to embrace our humanness. I think especially in a remote learning situation, this is more important. The more digital tools we use, the more human we need to become, because what happens is we don't often see the interaction on the other side of the screen. We don't know how we're doing this. And this is going to sound super weird. what I'm saying, but if you just bear with me, when I interact with people online, and I'm not 100%, I've tried to be really good at this. I assume they're dealing with some mental health, emotional stuff going on. And I'm not saying they're acting that way or anything like that. I just know that if I'm always cognizant, there could be something going on the other side of that screen, and I always err on the side of positive, that I'm always doing a good thing, that I'm always in that right space. And I think it's really understanding that 2 minutes of a snarky comment to someone on the other side of the screen might be only 2 minutes to you, but it might ruin their entire day or ruin their entire week. And so as we go into these digital spaces, it is so imperative that we understand we don't necessarily have the social cues that we do in a face-to-face space. So we really need to focus on the importance of being human. And that leads to the next point of learner-driven, evidence-informed practice. And I'm very thoughtful and explicit about the language that I use here. And this might get me in trouble, but I've talked about data-driven often, and I'll say this to you, and I really do mean it. Data-driven is the stupidest term in education. Like, it is beyond stupid. And I'm telling you, as a parent, if my daughters show up to your school and you tell us you are data-driven, we will homeschool our kids. I am not even kidding right now. And the reason I have such an issue with this term is not because of the people that say it. I think that people that say it have the same intentions that I do, that they want to do what's best for kids. But what I've seen in education happen over the past few years especially is we've taken the most human profession in the world and we started to reduce it to letters and numbers. And there's something really inherently wrong with that. And I'm not saying don't use data, by the way. That is not, do not take that out of this, what I'm saying right now. But I'm saying, what are we driven by? Like, why did we become educators? And I don't think anybody when they were a kid said, hey, you know what I'd like to do when I get older? Test kids. That'd be awesome, right? Nobody, if you do say that, there's probably something wrong with you, right? And so when we talk about this idea of learner-driven, evidence-informed practice, it's who are the kids in front of you? You know, what are their passions? What are their strengths? How do I know these things? And how do we use evidence? And the reason I use the term evidence over data is because when we use the term data, even though by definition it doesn't mean this, we think about letters and numbers. But evidence can be test scores, can be assignments that we do, but it's the interactions that we have. It's the conversations that we have with our students. It's when we see kids do extracurricular activities. I know a lot of who I am today was shaped by my coaches, and you couldn't actually measure with data. It'd be hard, but you can see incredible evidence of my learning in that space. And people will say to me, well, you always have to use best practice, and it's always got to be research-based. And first of all, research is being done by people in classrooms every single day. Every conversation you have with a kid, every conversation you have with a colleague, that's research that we're actually doing. And I always say this, the most important research we can do as educators will always be to know the learners we serve. Who are those kids? And I'm not saying don't use research-based practices. I'm not saying that at all. But when I hear a study saying something like this, or someone bring this up, well, if you use this practice, it's shown to work with 90% of kids. And I'm like, what about the other 10%? What are we doing for those kids? Because if you just go to the 90-10, you're losing out on 10% of kids, which to me is not acceptable, right? And saying, you know, how important that is in the work that we do. And here's a simple thing you can do to really be learner driven. And these are questions I encourage educators to ask and know about their students at the beginning of the year. And I'll talk about a few of them briefly. So for example, what are you passionate about? As I said earlier, if you knew I love basketball, could you have immersed that in some way into the learning? And I'm not saying don't teach the curriculum, but could you teach the curriculum, through some of my passions, through some of the things that I am really excited about, and actually do this. And I'll show you an example of that right away. The other one too, what are your strengths and how can we utilize them? When we do things like multi-tiered support systems, response intervention, which I think have the best intentions, one of the things that I've seen happen in those meetings is we have a kid who's struggling academically, and then we'll say, okay, this kid sucks at this, so here's how we're gonna fix them. And I want you to think about that process. And I'm not saying all schools do this, but I've seen it far too often. If I was your boss and I focus on what you couldn't do, and then I focus on the strategies I was gonna do to fix them. So I'm not saying don't focus on weaknesses, but when you have those conversations about kids, about adults, the first thing we need to say is, what is this person really good at? What gets them excited in the morning? How do we tap into that and actually focus on that? And as I said, focusing on strengths is not about ignoring weaknesses. It's starting at a place of value. It's making sure people feel valued. When you look at the process for many of our kids that we've done those response intervention, they're more likely to drop out of school because all they're hearing is, you're not good at this, we need to fix this, we need to fix this. No one wants to be in that space. But if you get them like, hey, we love that you're doing this, how do we bring that into a classroom? That is something that's really valuable. And the last one I just want to address really quickly is like, what does success at the end of the year look like to you? For me, we talk about success. People watching this right now, you could be successful and I can be successful, but we measure that ourselves and our measures might be totally different. But in education, what we tend to do is we define success for our kids, but asking them the question, teaching them how to define that for themselves, and then achieving their own goals is a really powerful process. And this should be something that we really focus on. But how do you immerse these things, and how does this actually tie in to the work that we do? And I love this example. This is a gentleman named Tom Scott who has a science channel, and he's got way over 1 million followers now. But when I first saw this, he had 780,000 followers on YouTube, or subscribers. So this student, what they're doing right now is they're explaining the concept of 0 calories and why it doesn't actually do the thing that we want it to do. So think about it. So he goes for 5 minutes, explains it beautifully. So let's think about it this way. You have a kid in your class, which you probably do, that wants to be like a TikTok star or a YouTuber, right? But we're over here saying, look, that's cool, but I got to teach science. But what I'm saying, if you said to the kid, you know what would be great? I need you to explain this science concept through a YouTube video. It's not innovation or the curriculum. How you teach the curriculum is the innovation. And I'm going to tell you straight up, you cannot do this. And I know your superintendent talked about this earlier, the notion of personalizing learning. I think that's really important. But understand this, you cannot personalize every single thing for every single kid every single day. It's not possible. But the more opportunities that you have for this, that you can tap into this, the more the hard stuff becomes easier. And I'm not saying that there's no compliance in the world. It's truly about empowering our students. But for example, compliance, I have to pay taxes in the US and I have to file with the IRS. I can't say to the IRS, hey, guess what? I did this beautiful PowerPoint for you this year to explain my taxes. Nope, I got to do it exactly the way they tell me. That's a reality of our world. But I don't mind doing that because I get to do something I love. I feel purpose in my work. And so that becomes a lot easier. So when we find these opportunities to really empower, tap into the passions and the strengths of our kids, it makes the harder stuff a lot easier. And that actually goes into the next point, is of creating empowering learning experiences. And when I used to talk about like engagement versus empowerment, but it's really a continuum of this. It's not either or. But the easiest way I can explain this, if you are engaged, it doesn't mean you're empowered. But if you are empowered, I guarantee you're engaged. But it takes it to a whole different level. But when I used to see the notion of empowerment, I used to see it more as action verbs like speaking and writing and things like that. And, engagement was more consumption verbs like listening, reading, things like that. But what I started to understand is really, it's not about the action as much as the voice and the choice. So for example, if you have me write about something I do not care about, that's not even empowerment or engagement. That's probably straight up compliance. But if I get to read books that I'm interested in, that I identify with and identify with the characters, identify with the story, that's empowerment if I have that choice. And what I've seen, and this is really interesting, there's kind of been a pushback towards leveled readers in the sense that kids will read at higher levels if they actually connect and they're interested in the content. So really, I remember as a kid, I used to read Sports Illustrated, Rick Riley, back page of every Sports Illustrated. He wrote this really emotional sports piece. I used to love it. But as a kid, I was told, well, that's not real reading and you can't do it in class. But I was reading all the time, and a lot of my work emulates that last article in every Sports Illustrated to this day. And it's the equivalent now is saying, oh, a kid reading a blog is not the same as reading a book. It's reading. We need to celebrate that, and that voice and choice matters. And looking at my other niece, Rain, her at 4 years old, before she goes to school, she has the ability to create videos. She's really empowered. She's self-taught through this process. And my fear is, unless she gets like a really special teacher, she's not gonna be able to do this. But honestly, it's not a fear, it's reality. This is her now. And she's totally empowered, sees that her voice matters. And here, just checklist, right? I'm not an absolutist, right? I don't think if you do worksheets, whether they're digital or on paper, that they're bad. But I think if you do them all the time, it's probably bad. And if you look at her and you really look deep, she is an incredible learner. She's absolutely incredible in the work that she's in the ability to learn. And this is a beautiful example. Within 2 weeks of getting her first drum set, never taken a lesson in her life, actually went onto YouTube, like a lot of kids, and is self-taught. You can see how incredible she is at this. Do you tap into her passions? Do you find her strengths as a learner? And what happens when you bring that out? Look, she's already got a groupie. You can see how quickly this happens, right? How incredible this is. And when we talk about these creating empowering learning experiences, it's giving kids different opportunities to learn in ways that are meaningful to them. And one of the things that we found was really helpful was building digital portfolios that gave students the opportunity to share their learning in meaningful ways. And this idea was actually inspired when I did this 10, 11 years ago with my staff. The idea was actually inspired by this video of this dad actually creating an email account for his daughter and emailing her life through his eyes. I actually have done this for both of my daughters, that I've created email accounts for both of them. When they're 18 years old, they're gonna open them. And I've been just sending them emails throughout videos, little messages to them. I just want to show you the inspiration behind this idea.
Ready for your big party today? Huh?
Honestly, I could barely watch that video because I already cried once today, and I don't want to. And like you can capture it easily on video of me bawling. I don't know if I'm ready for that. But I'll tell you, watching that video, if I saw that and didn't do it, I'd regret it my entire life. And so we said, look, this shouldn't be just for my own family. This should be for all of our kids. And this is like, you see how powerful this is. This is actually a video from years ago, and it seems really simple. This is Google Docs in plain English, super old school videos. And when Google Docs first came out, they would do paper slides. And really what's amazing about this, they explained the whole concept, but one of our students saw this and said, hey, I got to, pitch, roll, and yaw is something that we're learning about. What if I do pitch, roll, and yaw in plain English, just like they do in the Google Docs video? And so the student explains this, makes these paper slides, has to know this concept inside out, and explains the world. And what's beautiful about this, the student actually, I asked them about 5 years after doing this. I said, hey, tell me about pitch, roll, and yaw. They still knew it. We have kids who get 100% on a test, and you ask them 3 days later and they can't remember. And really, when we talk about learning, is it about deep understanding or memorization? Because if you have a deep understanding, by default, you're going to memorize it. But if you just focus on the memorization, it doesn't mean you actually understand the concept. And we want to give our kids these opportunities to do stuff, as said, is purposeful, meaningful to them, really empowers them. Years ago, we saw this idea from a teacher in Chicago named Josh Stumpenhorst, who did a thing called Innovation Day. So what he said to his kids, look, you have the entire day. I'm going to actually I'm going to give you opportunity to pose a problem you want to solve, and we'll give you the day to do this. We loved that idea, but we said, look, it is not enough time. Let's give these kids a week. So these kids in grade 8, not the best socioeconomic area, doesn't matter. You're thinking that creates your solutions. They decide we want to build hovercraft. So they start digging around the school, steal their parents' leaf blower, use it as a steering device. And then once one school does this, other schools start jumping on because these kids are rushing to school because they see themselves as innovators, inventors. They're solving problems that are meaningful to them. This young girl, her parents travel all the time, so she wants to lessen what they carry. She invents a toothbrush with a toothpaste as one piece. Press the tube, comes right out through the bristles. 12 years old, does this because of school. And I love this quote, that the person who says it cannot be done should not interrupt the person who's doing it. Are we the obstacle or are we the pathway? And when we talk about empowerment and moving from that shift, engagement, when you look at it, is more about what you can do for the students, but empowerment is about getting kids to understand what they can do for themselves. And if your students need you to learn when they leave your care, you actually haven't done your job. We have to make sure they learn to learn on their own and how important that is. And that leads to the last one of master learner, master educator. And one of the things why I'm so adamant about this, when I was in my last school district, before I started, doing the work that I'm doing today, we built this vision together. And what I love about this, it wasn't administrators sitting in an office saying, everyone, look at our new vision, here it is. We brought our staff together. We brought our community together. I'm talking like families and businesses. We brought our students and we said, what is important? What do we want to achieve? And then we crafted this together. And I am so proud because I actually challenged the word that was there before. It was students, that where you see in bold with learners. And I said, look, if we use students, that's the biggest part of our population, but only one part. But when we talk about learners, it actually ensures that we all grow and all of us should be able to aspire to reach our dreams in our role. Like, why wouldn't we want this for every single person in our organization? But the trade-off is you have to be a learner. You cannot just say, look, I've been teaching for X amount of years. I know what I'm doing. And so I'm going to talk quickly about these 3 terms. And the one that you're doing right now, learning for your students, this is by default the one we do in education all the time. And the second one, learning about your students. Who are they? What drives them, right? Really understanding them as people and taking that idea, those ideas and information and building really meaningful learning. That's something I've been talking about. The one that I want to address right now, though, is learning from your students. How do we create a culture, as I said earlier, where kids come to these spaces where they know that their contributions matter? And when I get challenged on this all the time because people say, well, isn't the teacher the expert in the classroom? I'm like, of course they're the expert. They're just not the sole source of information. And people say, oh yeah, because there's Google and YouTube. Yeah, of course there's those things. But every single student in your school brings, wisdom and experience. And do we tap into this? And one of the things that I saw, a great idea, Dr. Erin Lawson in Missouri, she did a thing called Student PD Day. So she'd identify a day. She did this in a face-to-face setting. You could totally do this remote. And she'd ask the kids, what's something you would want to learn? And then she'd have students lead professional learning sessions for that day. And she'd make a schedule, connect them all. And the educators would actually sit and learn from the students in these sessions. Talk about incredible meaning and that the kids feeling super valued in their work. And when people feel valued, they will go to the ends of the earth for you. And that includes students. And when we tap into this learning, it makes us more likely to be able to deal with struggle. And I say this all the time, is that change will come our way. We can go through it or we can grow through it. And when you look at the situation, are we just going through this and seeing this as a temporary, or is this something that is making us better as we move forward? And as I say always, you can fight change, adapt to change, embrace change, or lead change. No matter your choice, change is not going away. The best change that is possible is the one we decide to create. And so just some final words as you go into the rest of the day. And I'm so happy that so many of you have been connecting with me. And I hope that this isn't the only time we connect, that we have an opportunity to learn from each other through these times. So thank you so much for sharing. But just some final thoughts. When we look at what I've been seeing in the past few months, what I've been so impressed with is people are saying, look, we need to figure out a way to connect with our kids because they need our support. They're not focusing on, we need to start using Twitter. And they're starting with the better answers. And too often what we've done in education in the past, we said, hey, there's this new app, let's figure out how to use it. As opposed to say, look, we want our kids to be able to tell their stories. As Kristen was sharing at the beginning, we want our educators. There are so many incredible things that are happening in your schools right now. Does the world know? And if they don't, who is that on? Because you need to share those stories, not only for the public, but for each other, to show the incredible things that you're helping. So really focusing on those better answers and why they're important. And when we focus on the better answers, what do we actually create? And this is an amazing example. This is a school in Brazil that is teaching their kids English. And they said, who are the best people to teach your kids English? And they said, well, English speakers, actually. So what do? They connect this school in Brazil to a retirement home in Chicago. And what's amazing about this is not only the impact the adults have on the kids, but the impact the kids have on adults. It's a beautiful video.
Hello.
Melissa.
Hi, Dick. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
It's the first time that I'm talking with someone from another country.
I'm very excited to be doing this.
I look like I'm only 25, but I'm 88.
Do you have sisters and brothers?
No, I'm one child.
Only one? Oh, you poor fella.
I live with my old brother. He has 23 years.
Do you know, instead of saying he has 23 years, you could say he is 23 years old.
I tried to go to Lollapalooza that we have next week, I think, in Brazil, but my mom didn't let me.
You got a good mom.
Good morning, dear Julia. Good morning to you.
This is your dad?
That's me and my wife when we were young.
Oh, you were good looking when you were young. And you're still good looking.
My first destiny is United States, of course, because I wanted to put better my English.
Well, you do very well, I must say.
Are you planning someday to go to Brazil?
Oh, I would like to.
You can stay in my house if you want.
If you could just dream and have whatever you want, what do you think you would like to be doing?
I see myself in a big family, with a beautiful wife. I want to thank you for this change of experience, You are incredible.
Obrigado.
You are my new granddaughter, and I love you.
I love you too.
And if you were here, I would give you a big hug.
Oh yeah, let's hug. Oh.
Bye.
Bye.
And I don't know what, maybe it's because it's earlier. I'm crying the whole time. Just absolutely beautiful end message. More than better students, better people. Isn't this what we started to do? Understand, like, you see the impact those kids and the adults. That is what we do as educators. Your legacy is not in what you do, but it's in what the kids you serve do because of your work every single day. And just to close off, this is a quote that I shared in Innovate Inside the Box, and I think is so powerful, from Donna Volpita. She shares, resilience is about bouncing forward. Resilience doesn't just mean getting back to normal after facing a difficult situation. It means learning from the process in order to become stronger and better at tackling the next challenge. And as I read this quote, in this reality of the work that we have, I keep hearing this term. I keep hearing this over and over again, and it's driving me crazy. Oh, when we get back to our new normal. And the reason I hate it is because when people talk about a new normal, it's something that other people tend to create for us. But what I talk about is a new and better normal, because when we go back, because of what we're seeing, because of the opportunities that we have, what are we creating that is not only better for our students, but better for ourselves, where we really remember the purpose of why we do what we do, why we became educators in the first sense. So as you go into the rest of the year with all the complications of all you have, and I so appreciate you for all the tireless work that you have, focus on creating that new and better normal, because as I said, this is not only better for our students, but it's better for us as well. And this is what we need to choose to create together. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor to help you start off your year. I hope you have an incredible year, and thank you so much for all you do. Take care.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Those of you that have heard George for the first time, it's always inspirational, and obviously keeps it very practical for teachers And I always enjoy and learn something from him every time. So George, great to see you again. Thanks. We're going to have a 15-minute break, and then you'll be resuming the rest of your schedule. In a VUCA world, there's really not a new normal. It's more like a new now. So we'll embrace the challenges of today. We don't know what they'll be tomorrow, but engage, enjoy, and we hope you have a great day and a great week. It's great to see you back here. I missed all of you, and away we go. So thanks very much.